What happened in Episode 5 of The Rings of Power? How does it fit in with Tolkien's Legendarium? And what does it mean for the rest of the season? Let's take a look. Hi everyone, welcomes to Mystery Explorer. On this channel we cover the Rings of Power in full breakdowns, explanations and Hollywood movies and TV shows. If that sounds good, then please consider clicking the subscribe button on the bottom of your screen and the bell icon. We are now over the halfway point of Season 1 of The Rings of Power, and the pace is starting to pick up. The storylines are starting to join together primarily through Galadriel, who started out at Lindon, then came to Numenor, and will soon engage with the Southlands plot. But let's start with the one storyline that still stands broadly separate to the rest, the Harfoots and the Stranger. The Harfoots have started their migration to the Grove, which is still a bit of a mystery, but Nori describes it as basically a bountiful orchard, and we can see where they are headed, first south, and then across what we know as the Dead Marshes. Frodo and Sam made their way across there in The Lord of the Rings Remember, though the eerie dead faces they saw then are the results of battles yet to come in the Age of the Rings of Power. Then they head east, staying north of the mountains across the top of Mordor, or the Southlands as we are still calling it, and end the episode in some woodlands. They seem to be trying to find a pass that is open, so presumably they will be heading through a mountain range soon. Are they heading into Mordor itself? We'll see, but here things are not good. The land is not lush and beautiful, and there's not enough food to forage, and they get attacked by wolves. The Stranger intervenes, showing first immense strength, then powers to make a mini earthquake, knocking over those wolves, and then, in healing himself, he freezes water and himself, and Nori, who reaches out to help. She runs off scared, and seemingly we ended this episode with the opposite of where we were a bit ago. The Harfoots as a whole seem to now love the Stranger, after he saved some lives, but Nori is scared and sees him as a danger. Are we any closer to knowing he is? Not much in this episode, although he is now starting to get a stronger idea. He seems to be using his powers more intentionally than he did at first, and more muttering in his own language. There's also our first sight of an evil-looking trio of people seemingly tracking Meteor Man. We don't have much on these three at the moment. They are only on screen for a few seconds, other than apparently being called the Dweller. That's the main one who crouched down in the crater, the Nomad, and the Ascetic. And apparently they come from the east. I think if they are tracking Meteor Man, we could be pretty sure that they will catch up with the Harfoot's slow progress quite quickly, so more in future episodes. Moving to Lindon, we have Durin and Elrond visiting Gil-galad, and Celebrimbor seems to have come along for the ride too. While his massive forge is being built back home, we are starting to unpick a bit of what's been going on here, behind the scenes, what's been driving Gil-galad's odd behavior. The corruption that we saw on that leaf way back in Episode 1 actually started a bit earlier than the comet, so although we didn't get it spelled out this clearly, it seems that the comet wasn't bringing the corruption so much as perhaps responding to it. My reading is that Sauron started moving then in Middle-earth, hence the corruption not just in Lindon but further afield, and the situation is bad for the elves, really bad. The elves will apparently fade, and be forced to abandon Middle-earth by spring. The forces of darkness will sweep across the land in their absence. The only hope, it would appear, is to bathe the elves in the last remaining light from the two trees of Valinor. Remember them, it's a pure and holy and life-giving light, which was preserved in the three Silmarils. One of those was hidden in a tree on top of the Misty Mountains. An elf and a Balrog legendarily fought over it. Lightning hit the tree. The power of good-evil and the Silmaril sent Banes deep down into the mountains, to where Khazad-dûm is now, creating Mithril. So Gil-galad and Celebrimbor's plan is to get huge quantities of the Mithril, and give all the elves a power-up. Gil-galad didn't tell Elrond any of this, just sent him off to a region, and Khazad-dûm trusting him to figure it out. Now I do have to say at this point that all of this is a major shift away from Tolkien's Legendarium. This is all new background information and made up for the TV show. And leaving aside some of the pretty fundamental lore issues, we are still left with significant character changes, like Gil-galad being so deceptive, Elrond apparently breaking his oath to Durin by showing the Mithril to Celebrimbor, and so on. The important point for the show is that Gil-galad thinks that getting Mithril is a matter of life and death for the elves, and Elrond seemingly believes him. He persuades Durin of the importance and they head off back to Khazad-dûm to discuss it with Durin Sr. And I should probably also say there's a fair to reasonable chance that some of this might be a deception by Annatar, putting the idea into the elves' heads that they have to very quickly build a massive forge and get some mithril. Not everything here is as meets the eye. Let's go to Numenor. At the end of the last episode we saw the announcement that Miriel was sending a force of soldiers to go with her and Galadriel to the Southlands to chase out the orcs and install Helbrand as leader. And by the time this episode finishes, that's exactly what happens. In the meantime though, we do get a few extra things to chew over. The expedition is not a large one, just a few hundred soldiers in total, but it is controversial, the visuals of doing what an elf wants them to do, and even leaving Numenor to go to Middle-earth are angrily opposed by many, and many want Pharazôn to lead the opposition to it. Keeman and Iarion are among them. Those two are clearly on a path to the wrong side of Númenórean history. But Featherzone is playing a deeper game. He doesn't oppose this now, because he sees the possible future benefits, trade, tributes from a grateful Southlands and more strength than Numenor, which will allow them to then give orders to elves in the long term. Kevin's attempts to scupper the whole mission culminate in a rather amateurish if successful attempt to blow up a ship. He is saved by Isildur, who is rewarded for his troubles by being allowed to join the expeditionary force along with his friends. The real interest here though is Helbrand. For most of the episode he keeps up his resistance to the idea of going to the Southlands at all. He's won himself a job in a smithy and seems to be enjoying it. Galadriel tells him some of the truth of her backstory. Helbrand seems smoothed by it and her claim that he will not find peace here eventually. He decides to embrace his fate and go with her to be made to the king of the Southlands. If you watched some of my other recent videos, you'll know that I think that Helbrand is Sauron in disguise, and has been manipulating Galadriel this whole time, in which case something very curious is going on here, because Helbrand apologizes for her brother's death, which Sauron was of course responsible for, and there seems to be a look of understanding or kinship when she talks of her friends not being able to distinguish her actions from the evil she was fighting. Are the showrunners here hinting at a possible nod on evil or misunderstood parts to Sauron's character? Probably not. It's probably just more manipulation, but it's one to keep an eye on. Anyway, Helbrand gets on that ship to the Southlands, and in the Southlands the villagers in the Watchtower split. Some stay with Bronwyn, and others head off with Wildridge to surrender to Adar. Starting with Team Bronwyn, they discover a bit more about that evil-looking sword that Theo has. There's a carving of it on the wall of the Watchtower, and Arondir claims that it is a key conjured by some forgotten craft of the enemy to enslave the people of the Southlands. A key to what is uncertain as is exactly how it is to be used, but the carving on the wall seems to show it killing someone, and Adar certainly seems focused on getting hold of it. Bronwyn, after initially rallying the troops to stand and fight, now seems to be on the verge of quitting unless that's just another ruse. But yes, Adar is about to attack, and no, they don't seem to have much hope. But what of Adar, and what about that sword hilt or key or power as well? Drinker called it last episode. Well, Waldrake, who led the half of the villagers who decided to surrender, assumes that Adar is Sauron, but it appears not. Adar does accept his supplication though in return for a blood sacrifice, Rowan, and there is one otherwise out-of-place scene that I think explains a lot here. Adar is staring up at the sun and talking to a random orc absent-mindedly, making his flesh burn. Adar talks about how he will miss the sun when his plan comes to fruition. Bronwyn meanwhile wonders whether it is the fate of her people to live in the darkness. The Mordor we know is always in darkness. That's literally what Mordor means, the land of the shadows. Which isn't the case in this Primotor. This ties in incidentally with what Tar Palantir says to Miliel as she is about to set off for the Southlands. Don't go to Middle-earth, he says, all that awaits you there is darkness. So presumably the sword will have the power to somehow shut off the sun in Mordor, cover the land in dark clouds, night and day, creating a homeland for the orcs, subjugating the humans, elevating Adar to become a god as he hinted at last time. But first he to get that sword hilt. But what did I miss? What did you spot going on in this episode? Let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see more videos about the Rings of Power. Thanks for watching. That's all for this time. I'll see you again soon.